Now I want to talk about a couple more selection tools located inside Photoshop, and this first one is known as the Magic Wand tool. And it's not a widely used tool, but it does have its uses, but by understanding how it works, you'll understand when it's good to use it. And basically the way the Magic Wand tool works is, first of all, it's located right beneath those lasso tools. It's right in here. It looks like a little magic wand. And the way it works is it generates a selection based on a color range. And that's known as a tolerance setting. You'll notice up in here we've got our tolerance setting. Now, the default tolerance setting is 32. So when you first select this tool for the very first time, the tolerance is probably going to be set at 32. Now, when you go into a document with this default setting and click in there, so let's say I want to select this red area of this umbrella. With that default setting, if I go ahead and click inside here, you'll notice that it's going to look, initially where I clicked is going to affect how the rest of the selection is going to work. So if I click in this dark rich area here, based on a range of 32 levels of gray in your image is comprised of 256 levels of gray because it's an 8-bit image. Based on that tolerance setting, it's going to look at the whole image and see what other shades of red fall into that range, and it's going to add it to that selection. You'll notice some areas didn't get selected because they fell outside the range of that. Now you'll notice that this red area and this red area aren't connected, even though it still added it to the selection. And that's because of this setting here. Right now you see this contiguous setting is unchecked, meaning no matter what red area I click, it's going to look at the entire image and add that area to the selection. However, by checking it on and then doing that same thing, if I click right in here, it is only going to select those pixels that are neighboring each other, that are touching. So this area here, this red part of the umbrella, isn't connected to this other red part of the umbrella. Therefore, with this contiguous checked on, it will only select that area. But again, by unchecking it and then reapplying the selection, you'll notice that it does in fact include all that area. Now going back to the tolerance setting, you notice, remember I said it was set at 32. If I increase it, let's say I go to 75 for instance, and I click in that same red area, you'll notice that it has selected pretty much all of those red areas. And those areas that in here that weren't selected before because the tolerance setting was very low, they are now included in that. So when you're using the Magic Wand and you notice certain areas didn't get selected, you can certainly increase the tolerance and reapply that setting, and it will increase that. Now, another aspect of that, let's go back to the default setting here of 32. Now, let's say I go into this the blue area, for instance, and I use that default setting and click right in there with the Magic Wand. Notice how it did not select other areas. Again, they're falling out of that tolerance range. Now, if I didn't want to go back in there and just simply modify the tolerance setting, you can go back into that area and hold down your Shift key, and just like we did with that other selecting area with the adding shape selections by holding down the Shift key, you can do the same with the Magic Wand by holding down the Shift key and then clicking in a new area of the document, and you'll see that it basically is expanding the range of that selection automatically. You haven't changed the tolerance, you're just simply adding to that selection by holding down the Shift key. And it doesn't have to be the additional that same color. You can include additional colors too, so maybe I want to include the red areas in here to that selection. So, gives you an idea of how the Magic Wand works. Now I want to jump over and talk about another tool that makes a selection based on a color range, and that's the new Quick Selection tool, which is grouped right inside here with the Magic Wand tool. If I select that, I'm going to jump over to this image here that I've got open. Where'd my little flower go? Here we go. So here I've got an image. It's just a color flower against a green background. And now I want to isolate my selection. I want to select just the flower area itself. Now if I were to use for perhaps the Magic Wand tool, for instance, and I click, you notice based on that range of colors, it didn't get all the areas I needed. The way the Quick Selection tool works, very similar, works just like the Magic Wand in the sense that it paints those tolerance areas as you move your cursor around. So if I click inside here and I just click and start dragging, you notice as I creep outside the selected area and add more color ranges to the selection, it increases that area of the selection. So if I just kind of paint around and add all these areas to my selection, it will generate a selection of the entire flower. Quickly and easily adding to my selection. So if I wanted to in fact remove an area, let's say I dragged too far and I added maybe a little bit of this leaf in there. Well, I would simply hold down the Option or Alt key, and you see the plus sign turns into a minus sign. And that just simply is a matter of just clicking right inside there, and it does the exact opposite. It will actually remove that range of colors in there. And I have to be honest, this tool works surprisingly well. It's very popular amongst a lot of users, and being able to generate really accurate selections on relatively complex objects. Now, the contrast between this flower in the background is very obvious, so it made it a little easier to use that tool, but much, much easier when you're doing that. Now, another aspect of that I didn't mention in the last lesson and just briefly touched on a moment ago is removing areas of selection. Now, I talked about holding down the Shift key to add to a selection. But what about removing areas? No matter what type of selection you've got, maybe no matter how it was generated by which tool, all selections are the same, which means you can do all sorts of things to them. So if I generated this selection with the Refine Edge or with the Quick Selection tool, maybe I want to add a square area to it. So if I just hold down my Shift key and just drag inside here, it does the exact same thing. However, if I want to remove part of a selection, you simply hold down the Option key or Alt key, just like I talked about. So I'll just drag inside that area, and it removes that area. So anytime you have an active selection, holding down the Shift key and will add to the selection, holding down the Option or Alt key will remove areas of your selection. Now, one last thing I want to talk about when it comes to selections is once you've generated a selection and you want to make some changes to that, as I mentioned, you can go into the Select menu and you've got various tools here. But one of the cool features about selections is this little button right here. Anytime you're in any selection tool, you'll see this little button that says Refine Edge. When I click on that, it will open up a dialog that will allow me to modify my selection. As far as the radius of the selection goes, if I go and increase this, you'll see the radius of the selection is decreased or increased based on the currently active selection. I can increase the contrast to make those edges a lot sharper. If I want, I can smooth out the selection. If I've generated a selection on an object that has a lot of jagged edges, I can certainly increase the smoothness here. And every setting here, as I drag my mouse over, it shows an example of what's happening for each one. By feathering the selection, I can certainly make those edges considerably softer, as you can see right there. I can contract and expand the selection based on the currently active one. And not only that, I can display how I'm looking at my selection. Here I can see the selection the way it is. Here I can see it in quick mask mode, which gives me a color overlay, basically giving me a visual cue of my selection. Here I can view it against black, against white, or just simply as a straight black and white in case I want to make changes. If I want to tighten that up and take the smoothing down, take the contrast up, I can see the exact changes that are happening there. So it gives you a greater degree of control over how you can change the different aspects of your selection by using those Refine Edge. And as I mentioned, it's available in any selection mode. So quick and easy way of generating selections. I encourage you to just go through each one of the tools and practice on various images and see what kind of results you get, just so you can get used to the tools. And just by getting in the habits of how each tool works, you will become that much better at it.